In the summer of 1949, as doomsday colonies were being carved beneath the polar ice caps, the annihilation of the Wehrmacht's First Army Corps was in its final stages. For months it had been scoured from its historic territories in East Prussia, cut off from the surviving heartland of the German Reich by spreading tendrils of an eldritch landscape that snaked and splintered across the continent. With escape impossible, the bloodied remnants of the Corps' armies prepared for a final stand within their historic regional headquarters, a fortress city raised on the edge of the Baltic Sea. 7 centuries prior, a Teutonic castle had been constructed here. Atop the King's Hill, it became a place of shelter amidst crusade and rebellion. Once it offered refuge to Grand Masters, electors, and emperors. But in 1949, the final year of the First Sinfaxi War, there was nothing in that city that might have saved its last defenders. When the final moment arrived, molten stone, steel, and flesh coursed through its streets, like a searing, bubbling tide. The significance of that city and the sacrifice it represents has never faded in the Reich. It is propagandized alongside the Somme and the 10,000 of Berlin as a seminal moment in the nation's history, part of a heroic soul from which the modern interstellar Reich draws strength. So when that name appeared on the bow of a Kriegsmarine warship, the first of its class, the signal to the Orion arm could not have been made any more clear. Every cruiser in every fleet now operated in the shadow of Königsberg. Widely regarded as a pace-setter in next-generation warship design, the Königsberg-class heavy cruiser has garnered significant attention for its clear utility and groundbreaking capabilities. Constructed for the Kriegsmarine of the German Reich, it is a multi-role vessel intended for command and control, anti-starship, anti-aerospace, terrestrial, and electronic warfare. Ships of the class serve as support elements in larger battle fleets, lead or escort smaller flotillas, and are often deployed independently. The design is the culmination of the Reich's battlefield experiences, going back a quarter century, and forms a key pillar of the Plan 89Z fleet modernization program. Improvements over previous designs are centered on its lethality, electronic warfare, and detection reduction. It is also one of the few examples of a heavy cruiser with a spinal railgun arrangement, and, in a departure from earlier Kriegsmarine doctrine, includes an organic carrier wing. Introduced in 2281, the Königsberg is one of the newest warships in the Orion arm. With a projected 35-year service life, the design is set to replace the aging Berlin-class heavy cruisers and Lettow-Vorbeck-class battlecruisers over the next 2 decades. Already, it has seen action in multiple theaters, earning its place as a promising component of Axis military power. Among the naval fleets of its rivals, the class has been assessed by the Champlain Group and other independent observers to be one of, if not the, most capable and formidable ships of its type. The Königsberg class is operated primarily by the Kriegsmarine, the German interstellar navy. It has been observed within its largest premier armadas, including the High Seas, Germania, and Tannhauser fleets, as well as in various regional commands, squadrons, and temporary task forces. Its introduction across the breadth of the Kriegsmarine suggests a deliberate preference for evenly distributing its capabilities, thereby limiting their concentration in any single formation for the next 3 to 5 years. The only acknowledged operators of the Königsberg outside the German Navy are the Zollgrundschutz, a border patrol service under the Reich's finance ministry, and the Reich Colonial League, which administers the nation's most distant settlements in the far frontier. Both operate only a few of these warships, likely in an assessment capacity in advance of a potential subclass or mission modules tailored to their respective needs. Many of the advanced technologies used aboard the Königsberg are reserved for domestic use, and the Reichstag has prohibited its sale or license to any other nation. An export variant that omits several of these systems is currently in development, sometimes referred to as the Königsberg X or Castle class. It is expected to be made available to Axis nations before the end of the current year, with orders anticipated from the Portuguese Navy, the Navy of the Union of Bulgaria and Romania, the Hungarian Space Forces, and Verngren Fleet Command. Although this export variant has yet to be introduced, ships with similar characteristics to the more sophisticated base model, featuring unfamiliar modifications and liveries, have been sighted across the Reich since 2283. This has prompted speculation that a parallel production run of the class, or some variant, may have unofficially entered service within one or more of the Reich's intelligence agencies or secret paramilitary branches. Within the Kriegsmarine, the Königsberg is a highly versatile asset, well-suited for fleet escort and defense, raiding and commerce warfare, planetary bombardment, independent patrols, and gunboat diplomacy. In its fleet support role, the Königsberg typically operates in the middle and innermost layers of a formation, where it supplements capital ship defenses against enemy munitions, starships, and aerospace squadrons. Offensively, Kriegsmarine doctrine during a major action against a peer adversary calls for the class to prioritize the destruction of rival enemy cruisers. With dedicated flag facilities, the Königsberg can additionally provide supplementary command and control and may form the core of, or even lead, component formations of other cruisers or escorts within the battle fleet. These subunits might be tasked with heavy reconnaissance, flank security, or held in reserve as a breakthrough force. The vessel's onboard Aerospace Wing, limited offensively in fleet actions of this scale, would instead be utilized for additional reconnaissance, close-range patrols, and point defense. During a planetary assault, raid, or demonstration, the Königsberg can be integrated into the orbital artillery groups favored by the Kriegsmarine, providing sustained fire support and assisting in the suppression of enemy terrestrial defenses. Alternatively, certain stealth characteristics make the vessel well-suited for high-speed, over-the-horizon passes when facing more sophisticated surface fire. The ship has limited atmospheric maneuverability, only employed in uncontested or low-risk environments. Within smaller independent squadrons and flotillas, the Königsberg can serve as the formation's anchor, its primary anti-ship combatant, and a cornerstone of its aerospace defense. The class has repeatedly been observed operating in this capacity alongside the Stellamark-class carriers, a pairing notably favored by the Kriegsmarine's fleet command. Yet its command and control facilities also enable the class to assume the role of flotilla leader, a position previously reserved during high-endurance operations for the Reich's larger carriers and battlecruisers. These formations are most often tasked with convoy raiding, long-range patrols, and deep space reconnaissance, operating in areas where capital ships would be impractical or unnecessary. Deployed individually, the class remains effective in many of these same roles, leveraging its endurance and flexibility. In low-intensity theaters, even a single Königsberg can act as an instrument of soft power, conducting anti-piracy operations, deterring potential adversaries, and engaging in humanitarian and diplomatic missions. Over the last quarter century, interstellar naval construction has been shaped by two dominant trends: the exponential increase in warship sophistication and the growing reach of even smaller space forces across the Orion Arm. The consequence has been the longest, most intense naval arms race in human history. In the Königsberg are some of the clearest indicators yet in how the Kriegsmarine intends to meet and dominate this evolving environment. Though the full technical specifications of the design remain undisclosed, publicly available information concerning the Reich's Plan 89Z demonstrates clear priorities. A centerpiece of the program at the time of its announcement, what was then known as the JH-class cruiser, was required to meet the following specifications. A large multi-role warship with a mass of approximately 20 million tons. Sufficient endurance to perform an unassisted deployment to the Bouillon Isles cluster without replenishment. Incorporation of Heimdall interstellar surveillance radar. A minimum of 60 RLS cells and 12 KMK C-78 naval guns. A carrier air wing of no fewer than 6 squadrons. And limited atmospheric flight with assisted terrestrial takeoff. The design of the class was initiated within the Kriegsmarine's internal construction office in 2272, and finalized no later than 2277. Political developments in Germania prevented any competitive bidding process. Tensions still lingered between the military and several prominent state-owned Reichswerk, following costly procurement failures in the late 2260s, and German megacorporations were only brought into the project midway through the design phase, primarily as consultants, and later to integrate certain high-end systems, including propulsion, fire control, and electronic warfare. Despite its advanced role, deliberate efforts were made to avoid using the class as any kind of technology demonstrator or test bed. To prioritize production targets, only proven systems that had already been put through their paces on other Kriegsmarine warships were integrated into its design. Yet the ongoing arms race appears to have impacted this process heavily. Initially, the JH-class was part of the Reich's response to the Soviet Rativy II cruiser, scheduled at that time to enter widespread service before the end of the decade. In 2273, however, just 1 year after the commencement of Plan 89Z, the Imperial Japanese Navy, likewise threatened by Soviet naval developments, began construction of their own Sakurajima-class heavy cruiser. This prompted a response from the Solidarité of Çare Makasa in the form of the Santian class and the Republic of Turkey's Turgut Reis class. Yet the ultimate disruptive element was the Richelieu, whose keel was laid in 2275, marking the introduction of the first fleet dreadnought within France's Marine Nationale. In this new operating environment, the JH-class was altered to maintain parity. Compared to initial concepts, the final approved design was larger and featured a greater armament, replacing its original twin-gun turrets with a triple arrangement, and sporting additional RLS cells and Sea-Whiz batteries. A spinal railgun, running roughly 2/3 of the ship's length, was the most substantive addition, almost certainly a reaction to the Richelieu that must have necessitated a major redesign of the entire JH project. Construction of the class leader took place between 2277 and 2280 in the Blomvoss wing of Kriegsmarine Werft Germania. Initially built within a closed slip, it spent the final 6 weeks of this process anchored alongside the fleet dreadnought Tannhauser and battlecruiser Tirpitz, 2 of the fleet yard's other major contributions to Plan 89Z. The Königsberg's naming and launch ceremony occurred on the 18th of October, 2280. Among the dignitaries in attendance was Minister of the Kriegsmarine, Hans Wickmann, and Commander-in-Chief, Caroline Richter. In its final configuration, the Königsberg-class exhibits the aggressive, angular features typical of a modern warship of the Reich. Its hull follows a rough, dagger-like silhouette, tapering at the prow, growing broad and layered across its midsection, and with a complex arrangement of heat sinks and engine arrays forming the vessel's aft. A central superstructure rises above the main hull, the primary hangar bays recessed beneath it. From bow to stern, ships of the Königsberg-class span just over 1.4 kilometers, with a beam of 419 meters and a height of 421 meters. Their total mass is roughly 24.7 million tons. This places them amongst the largest warships in their type in service across the Orion Arm, and the largest heavy cruiser ever constructed by the Kriegsmarine. Autonomous and smart systems are powered by a variant of the Geist 7 Brunhild warship intelligence, specifically modeled for use across the Königsberg-class. Comprising several hundred subordinate intelligence clusters, the Brunhild, particularly its fire control radar and electronic warfare AI, is believed to be one of the most sophisticated operational systems in the Orion Arm. Yet recent conflicts have exposed the vulnerabilities of pure automation, and so the design builds upon a hybrid approach, leveraging the strengths of advanced artificial intelligence clusters while maintaining the reliability and redundancy of a skilled crew. Networking and communications are provided by a Siemens Halske GV5 translight array, enabling ships of the class to act as a mobile node within Yggdrasil, the Reich's private military network. The class can send and receive data between any other compatible asset within a star system, from Heer combat controllers, Luftwaffe aerospace squadrons, to even civilian operatives in service to the Abwehr or other Axis intelligence services. When operating within the coverage of a friendly translight network, interstellar FTL communications can be achieved with minimal delay, depending on the source's point of origin. Instantaneous communications are also possible, though far more limited, and reserved for high-priority updates, encrypted commands, or critical intelligence. In contested battle spaces or more remote regions of the Orion Arm, a Königsberg will be reliant on a dedicated command and control ship or courier vessels for swift communications across interstellar distances. The experience of Axis forces during the breakup of the Arab Federation, the war for the Bolivar Sea, and the Tanarsis crisis, the closest the Reich has come to a peer-on-peer conflict, are reflected in the Königsberg's diverse arsenal. Modern theaters have demonstrated the spectrum of threats a warship may encounter has never been broader, encompassing interstellar, aerospace, and terrestrial domains. In response, Kriegsmarine designers have further refined their approach to flexible and layered shipboard weapon systems. The Königsberg's primary armament is the MVS-43 radial launch system. 72 cells are located on the ship's forward dorsal hull, with an additional 32 positioned near the stern. This is the longest ranged weapon equipped to the class, able to strike targets within the vessel's close, intermediate, and far engagement zones. When assisted by satellites, accompanying warships and strike craft, or other external targeting systems within Yggdrasil, the RLS's effective range within a star system becomes theoretically unlimited, constrained only by the number of mid-course adjustments required for a missile to reach its target. A variety of munition types can be deployed by this system. The VS-490 Schwertwall is currently the Kriegsmarine's primary anti-ship missile, fielded across a growing majority of its interstellar competence. The newest model features improvements to its onboard ECCM and stealth characteristics. A similar multi-purpose missile, the VM-240 Donnerkeil, is optimized for terrestrial use, compatible with a range of warhead types, and features cruise capability in atmosphere. Finally, the RLS can also fire the medium-ranged anti-aerospace and anti-missile VL-380 Jagdspieß, fitting 16 of these smaller missiles into a single cell. The Königsberg's secondary armament is the 640mm KMK C-78 naval gun, a hybrid electromagnetic launcher. This weapon uses rail acceleration for initial velocity, followed by a second-stage coil system to further increase speed and precision. It can fire a variety of kinetic penetrators and specialized munitions at different velocities, including explosive-enhanced rounds, cluster shots, and atmospheric re-entry projectiles. The class is equipped with 18 of these guns, mounted in 6 triple-barreled turrets, 4 positioned on the dorsal hull and 2 on the ventral. An additional 20 double-barreled turrets, mounting the smaller 280mm version of the C-78, are included in the Königsberg's tertiary armament. They are supplemented by 8 Mk308 rapid-fire naval guns, likewise able to seamlessly transition between various types of ammunition. In combat, these weapons provide additional anti-starship support, but can also target enemy drones and squadrons, supplementing anti-aerospace capabilities. The Königsberg continues the trend of increasingly robust close-in weapon systems, driven in part by the Soviet Union's predilection for immense anti-ship missile saturation attacks, a long-standing concern within the Kriegsmarine. 8 Seawiz batteries are distributed across the vessel's port and starboard flanks, as well as its ventral and dorsal hull. Each battery consists of 5 NBW-70 combination gun, laser, and missile systems, except for those on the ventral aft hull, which include only 3. Fire control for each battery is managed by a dedicated AI cluster within Brunhild, which assigns individual targets to each system and selects the appropriate munition. Against larger capital ships or heavily fortified terrestrial targets, the class is also equipped with a single KMK 1000mm C-74 Paris gun, colloquially known as Maximilian, a smaller version of the spinal railguns mounted aboard Kriegsmarine capital ships. The Königsberg is one of the few heavy cruisers in the Orion Arm to field such a weapon. It spans nearly 2/3 of the ship's total length, with a recessed barrel located within the split hull of the bow. Due to the immense cost of the weapon's maintenance, electromagnetic side effects, and the risk of structural fatigue from repeated firings, Kriegsmarine doctrine restricts its use to high-value targets. For situational awareness, threat detection, and battle management, the Königsberg-class utilizes one of the most advanced sensor suites in the Orion Arm. The Fume G949 Heimdall interstellar surveillance radar is at the center of these systems, providing long-range tracking on upwards of 15,000 separate targets, starships, aerospace craft, munitions, and environmental hazards. Of these, roughly 1/10 are able to be tracked actively, while the number of targets that can be engaged simultaneously is classified. When active, however, the Königsberg's stealth characteristics are effectively nullified. Navigational radar consists of the Fume B815, a low probability of intercept system, while Fugit 712 planetary reconnaissance radar offers high-resolution ground mapping and target tracking radar in terrestrial domains. 2 optical, 3 infrared, and 1 multispectral telescope supplement these systems, the latter featuring a 16-meter aperture with adaptive optics and long-range target identification. Fire control radar, a traditional strength of the Kriegsmarine, consists of the FUMO 720 and 723 systems for RLS missile and interceptor fire control, respectively. 6 FUMO 786 Donar heavy gunfire control systems are also on board, 1 for each of the main turrets. Tertiary batteries utilize multiple FUMO 650 medium-caliber fire control systems, which direct between 2 and 5 turrets depending on targeting solutions. Finally, the Maximilian railgun has its own dedicated system, the FUMO 918 spinal targeting radar. LiDAR systems, including the Fuli 600 interstellar surveillance system and the Fuli 340 precision tracking systems, enable detailed target profiling, sensor redundancy, and are used to aid onboard holographic displays. When managed by the Brunhild Warship Intelligence, these sensors are able to rapidly disperse information, allowing more narrowband fire control systems to receive targeting data from the wideband Heimdall system. This improves response times by ensuring weapons are always assigned the most up-to-date tracking data, while preventing individual radars from being overwhelmed. Beyond targeting, sensor fusion allows the ship to track velocity, maneuver patterns, and electronic emissions, refining threat assessment and countermeasure deployment. Information regarding the Königsberg's protection systems remains highly sensitive. It is nearly guaranteed, however, to be utilizing the latest version of a composite multi-layered armor that foreign observers have sometimes designated Kruppstahl 280. It is composed of multiple armor layers categorized into 2 primary types: An ultra-hard outer layer deflects grazing hits, resists thermal damage, and provides secondary protection against micrometeor impacts and battlefield debris. Beneath it, a disruptive layer of aerogels and smart fluids absorbs kinetic energy and breaks up incoming projectiles. Additional hard and disruptive layers may follow, though their number and configuration remain unknown. Lastly, an integrated electromagnetic system helps to mitigate self-inflicted disruptions from the ship's railgun fire, works in concert with the ship's ECM to disrupt incoming missiles and drones, and acts as a system of last resort against lighter railgun fire, theoretically capable of exerting minor deflections on lighter railgun rounds, potentially shifting more punishing impacts into grazing strikes. Though there have been several instances of warships surviving armor penetration, direct hits to vital systems remain overwhelmingly fatal, reinforcing the prevailing doctrine that no system can fully prevent the destructive potential of kinetic weaponry. Far more effective are those systems that instead impede the enemy from engaging, acquiring, and identifying the vessel in the first place. On the Königsberg, this is achieved through a combination of countermeasures, support measures, and stealth systems. Active defensive measures consist of deployed flares, chaff, and specialized types of drones. Flares and chaff are coordinated through Brunhild, allowing for layered decoy deployments that confuse both infrared and radar-guided systems. This active suite is designed to complement the ship's defensive and offensive options by forcing enemy systems to waste targeting cycles, buying critical moments for the Königsberg to maneuver or retaliate. The electronic warfare suite aboard the Königsberg is provided by the TW-490 Nebelwerfer ECM system for jamming, deception, and cyber warfare, and the TWS-97 Tarncap ESM system for signature masking, passive defense, and battlefield awareness. Both work in concert with one another and represent the pinnacle of the Reich's advancements in electronic warfare. Nebelwerfer ECM in particular is noted for its ability to generate phantom sensor returns to obfuscate the source of its jamming, while also anticipating enemy missile guidance updates. The Tarncap system is similarly advanced, excelling in passive detection and counter-ESM operations, not only gathering intelligence, but also identifying and analyzing enemy attempts to do the same. Statements from the German Reich have clarified that the Königsberg is not a stealth ship, but rather possesses some characteristics of stealth. Electronic warfare systems contribute to this capability, but the class also features radar-absorbing materials, a reduced sensor cross-section, and thermal signature management. The most advanced of these are 6 articulated heat sinks positioned along the port and starboard sides. Each incorporates a low observable radiator system designed to selectively release heat in specific directions, minimizing thermal signature exposure. The ability to extend or retract these structures allows the Königsberg to manage heat dissipation dynamically, reducing detectability by enemy infrared sensors. The Königsberg-class is powered by 3 Feldberg FR-78 aneutronic fusion reactors, a design largely unchanged since its introduction across the Kriegsmarine in 2264. Compared to older deuterium-tritium systems still in use across the Orion arm, the FR-78 eliminates the need for turbines, reduces waste heat, enhances stealth characteristics, and requires less shielding. Additionally, a compact onboard enrichment and refinement system enables a crew to process raw borate minerals into fuel for use in emergencies. Propulsion consists of 2 Blomvoss fusion maneuver drives, each equipped with primary, secondary, and tertiary thrust nozzles. Arrays of high-impulse plasma-based vernier thrusters provide long-duration maneuvering in most situations, while fusion-augmented gas thrusters allow for rapid repositioning in combat. In emergency situations where main power is offline, a secondary chemical thruster system provides independent propulsion and last resort maneuvering. The Königsberg class has a ship's company of approximately 8,700 souls, which can fluctuate depending on its mission profile, status, and other external factors. While this represents a slight increase over previous Kriegsmarine cruisers, Even when accounting for its larger size, it also reflects a broader trend across the Orion Arm, where crew sizes, after decades of decline, have stabilized or begun to grow once more. Roughly 40% of the crew is assigned to the ship's air and drone wing, responsible for aerospace operations, maintenance, and strike coordination. When operating as a flagship, its total complement may increase by an additional 5 to 15% to accommodate fleet command staff, liaison officers from escorting vessels or squadrons, and other personnel supporting fleet logistics, intelligence, and joint operations. They are assigned temporarily based on operational requirements and do not form part of the ship's standard complement. To maintain crew sustainability over extended deployments, the class incorporates a greater emphasis on comfort, recreation, and long-term operational readiness. Deck layouts follow a traditional horizontal arrangement, with complete synthetic gravity and inertial mitigation provided by mass-generation plating integrated throughout the ship. Specialized configurations in training areas and medical facilities allow for variable gravity, simulating planetary conditions or optimizing rehabilitation environments as needed. Smaller, quieter berthing areas with 60 sit-up racks stacked too high help reduce foot traffic, each accompanied by a shared head, showers, and lounge area. Clusters of berths, typically between 8 and 20, also share dedicated gymnasiums and training facilities, briefing rooms that double as theaters, and state halls reserved for political and ideological programs or patriotic events. Simulation rooms replicate terrestrial conditions with artificial skies, sunlight, and greenery, often incorporating gardens or hydroponic farms. Among the more unique amenities aboard the Königsberg are imitation alpine climbing walls spanning multiple decks in height, as well as Bierstuben, or beer halls, where the crew can enjoy alcohol in moderation under strict fleet regulations, an uncommon privilege in the navies of the Orion Arm. The ship also contains Kriegsmarine facilities, more luxurious and spacious areas reserved exclusively for those in the upper echelons of the Kriegsmarine social credit system. To accommodate rapid movement, the class includes internal monorail systems running much of the length of the ship. 2 parallel tracks extend across both the port and starboard sides, dedicated to crew transport between critical areas. Separate automated cargo lines are positioned below and handle the transfer of munitions, engineering components, and medical supplies. While not high speed by civilian standards, the monorail prioritizes reliability and accessibility, with designated priority access for officers, damage control teams, and emergency medical evacuations. Security measures regulate the transport of sensitive materials, allowing for rapid lockdowns or rerouting when needed. The Königsberg belongs to the first generation of warships developed after the death of Reichskanzler Niemeyer, whose political ascent was rooted in his tenure as Minister of Aviation. Under his leadership, the Luftwaffe became his personal fiefdom, and favoritism toward his base of power persisted throughout his administration. This led to tensions with the Kriegsmarine, exacerbated by proposals from Niemeyer's allies that sought to establish the Luftwaffe as the Reich's premier space force, diverting resources and influence away from the Navy in favor of its own expanding interstellar fleet. While the most extreme of these initiatives, such as transferring all fleet carriers to Luftwaffe control, were never realized, Niemeyer's tenure nonetheless de-emphasized the role of aerospace wings within the Kriegsmarine. Since the rise of his successor, nearly all of these policies have been reversed, and the Königsberg exhibits renewed investments in carrier-based aviation across the Navy. Its hangar facilities are the largest ever fitted aboard a German cruiser, a belated reaction to Japanese, American, and Soviet doctrines, each of which have emphasized the benefits of organic aerospace wings in cruiser fleets for much of the last century. The Königsberg-class carries an aerospace wing consisting of 8 squadrons and multiple detachments, with its configuration dependent on theater, mission objectives, and available support. In the local supercluster, where power projection and strike missions are most common, ships of the class are estimated to carry 4 multi-role fighter squadrons, along with 2 squadrons specializing in early warning and electronic warfare, respectively. The remaining 2 squadrons consist of dropships, providing support for terrestrial warfare, combat search and rescue, and surface fire support. Smaller detachments aboard are often temporary and typically consist of interfleet logistics and other auxiliary craft. In the Antares Gap bordering the Soviet Union, the configuration changes to emphasize battle group aerospace defense. Multi-role fighters may be supplemented or replaced with space superiority craft and additional early warning squadrons. A third air wing arrangement, observed during Axis operations in the Acadian Expanse, appears dedicated toward expeditionary and terrestrial actions, with fewer fighter squadrons and additional detachments of close air support, dropships, and reconnaissance craft. Among the strike craft confirmed to be included in a vessel's air wing are variants of the ME-712 multi-role fighter, the FW-919 Fleet Defense Interceptor, and DO-230 attack craft. Dropships include the BV-270 utility transport and HE-140 attack craft. Separate hangar facilities positioned on the Königsberg's flanks are dedicated to drones and certain types of loitering munitions. The largest of these is the MG-33 Harpuje, a platform roughly the size of a heavy dropship dedicated to electronic warfare and signals intelligence. 32 are carried aboard, and when deployed, extend the vessel's surveillance range, enhance jamming capabilities, and contribute to battlefield deception. Beyond disrupting enemy sensors, the Harpuje also functions as an advanced countermeasure system, simulating the electronic signatures of larger warships, fighter squadrons, or other critical assets. To further mislead hostile targeting systems, they deploy false radar returns, infrared flares, and basic chaff, ensuring that enemy fire is drawn toward the drones rather than the Königsberg itself. Additional unmanned platforms include smaller combat, electronic warfare, utility, and rescue drones. These range from interceptors that engage incoming missiles and strike craft to long-endurance reconnaissance platforms that, alongside the MG-33, extend the ship's sensor coverage deep into contested space. Autonomous loitering munitions assist with aerial denial, while specialized drones support fleet logistics and damage control, ammunition resupply, onboard repairs, and casualty evacuation. The warship Königsberg was officially entered into the Kriegsmarine's ledger of active vessels on February 22, 2281. Following just under a year of star trials and an initial operational test and evaluation program. These were conducted within the Reich's Tannenberg military exclusion zone, where the ship's armament was fired for the first time. Simultaneously, production of the class expanded to 16 shipyards across the Reich, a number that may have now surpassed 30 separate facilities. Improvements in the building process are estimated to have reduced the timeline of ship construction by up to 1/3, and more than 80 ships are currently in active service as of 2285. Production is expected to fully ramp up in 2289, with as many as 250 vessels coming off the line that year. In its initial years of service, the Königsberg has seen action under a variety of conditions. The first major operation involving the class occurred in July of 2281. The eponymous class leader, then assigned to the 1st Scouting Group of the High Seas Fleet, took part in the evacuation of Axis civilians caught in the outbreak of the Silastra Civil War. Following the downing of a Spanish commercial transport during the effort, the Königsberg was part of the Axis retaliation, firing a total of 19 Donnerkeil missiles against terrestrial targets held by democratic forces. In 2282, another vessel, the Pilsen, was assigned to the Axis contingent of the Solar Quarantine. Over its 6-month deployment, it participated in the tracking of several dozen trespassing craft and was involved in the boarding of at least one. Though this record is itself unremarkable, it was the first time a ship of the class had been involved in any international commitment. As the Reich has traditionally avoided deploying its more advanced warships to the quarantine, It is suspected that the Pilsen used the opportunity to train its electronic support measures on the transmissions of Soviet and other foreign vessels in the solar system. To date, however, the most dramatic action involving a ship of the class took place in the far frontier. At its center was the Thetis, then newly commissioned into the Reich Colonial League. In December of 2283, the ship had embarked on a year-long patrol that would take it beyond the Genunga Gap to some of the most distant Axis and independent colonies. Like most warships assigned to the frontier, its mission was a blend of commerce protection, deterrence, and power projection, bolstering the Reich's presence across its outer marches, while showcasing the benefits of alignment with the interstellar fascist movement. By March of the following year, the Thetis had arrived in Forseti, a barely inhabited system on the periphery of a failing confederation of independent colonies, mercenary states, and thinly veiled bandit kingdoms. Growing uncertainty in the region had coincided with a rise in piracy, turning planetary systems like Forseti into waypoints within a vast smuggling trail that linked disparate criminal empires across the far frontier. During a routine patrol of the system, the Thetis conducted a 5-day port visit to Felix Station, an independent settlement of approximately 40,000 people located on a large moon from which it took its name. On the surface, the station consisted of the usual frontier infrastructure, ingeniously adapted to a dense and primal swampland. Directly above, a dated but reliable starport formed the center of a small orbital district, consisting of a few private anchorages, trade posts, crew exchange hubs, and other frontier outposts. German sailors were welcomed here, as their warship hosted the colony's magistrate, donated economic development modules, and conducted a brief joint exercise with local security forces. As the Thetis departed to sweep the other moons of Felix's parent gas giant, it grew suspicious of a convoy of freighters that had arrived in Forseti and was heading for the station. Signals intelligence indicated that the convoy, consisting of roughly 50 vessels centered around 3 large transports, possessed several instances of active military-grade radar. Surveillance assisted by the Thetis's drone complement further revealed the encroaching ships had been heavily modified from their original designs, including the removal of sensor reflection plates compulsory aboard civilian vessels. Further reconnaissance identified that the larger transports had been refitted into effective motherships, while the escorts around them were brimming with a mixture of illegal weaponry. Hangar facilities on several craft even indicated that the fleet possessed its own aerospace squadrons, interceptors, or some model of dropships. The Thetis was covertly rerouted back to Felix, passively intercepting communications as it approached between the colonial administrators and the incoming ships. The pirate craft were soon identified as belonging to an armed wing of the Frontier Union, a nominal political movement on many worlds that served as a front for one of the region's largest criminal organizations. Demands for security payments, a common form of extortion, provided the final proof and compelled the warship to act. The intercept was performed on the morning of March 23rd local time, directly over Felix Station. As the pirates entered into a low orbit, sensors across their fleet briefly registered several dozen intermittent contacts on a roughly parallel course. Some were only 2,500 kilometers away, just over the horizon. Union survivors, interrogated after the incident, stated that as they approached, they initially believed these contacts to be part of a ruse, a widely known distraction tactic developed during the corporate war. The subsequent demand to surrender, broadcast by a voice claiming to be aboard a German warship, was likewise discounted. They assumed Felix Station was bluffing, using smaller patrol craft as a screen. The assumption was shattered moments after one final order to surrender, when the German vessel fired a railgun round, a warning shot. Confused, blind, and split between conflicting loyalties, some elements of the Union force followed an order to retreat, while others launched indiscriminate missile salvos at both the ghost fleet of contacts on the horizon and Felix Station itself. Electronic warfare measures escalated almost instantly, prematurely detonating hundreds of missiles across the battle space, including those still in their silos. Over a dozen Union vessels were disabled by their own munitions. In less than 90 seconds, railgun fire from the Thetis had destroyed 2 motherships and all but 9 of their escorts. After the remaining pirate forces surrendered, damage to the planet was assessed as minimal, limited to outlying areas deemed no threat to Felix Station. In the aftermath of the engagement, the colonial magistrate of Felix Station ceded certain resource rights to the Reich Colonial League. Shortly thereafter, Windhund, a frontier mercenary corporation with strong ties to the fascist movement, supplemented and then fully replaced its local security forces. Over the next 6 months, enthusiasm within the Frontier Union was assessed to have declined dramatically, sparking mass desertions among the rank and file. At the same time, fascist organizations as distant as Reunion recorded a notable surge in interest and recruitment. Though it has sometimes been asserted that the ship's captain deliberately escalated the situation to provoke an attack, the performance of the Thetis is highly regarded. The action is today discussed in naval academies across the Orion Arm as a superb example of cruiser operations in frontier regions, showcasing the strategic value of anti-piracy operations throughout independent space. The Champlain Group assesses the Königsberg-class to be one of the most advanced and formidable types of heavy cruiser in the Orion Arm. Designed to outmatch its contemporaries, the class will form the backbone of the Kriegsmarine's cruiser fleet as it enters the next century. The addition of a spinal railgun and carrier wing represents an evolution in doctrine, though the overall design remains iterative rather than revolutionary. Proven systems should minimize production delays, but full fleet integration is expected to be a long-term process. The most significant rivals the Königsberg is likely to face include the Japanese Sakurajima-class, which is larger and better armed, but estimated to be weaker in electronic warfare and networked operations. The American Bay Ridge-class Flight II cruisers provide another capable counterpart, excelling in long-range engagements but lacking the stealth capabilities of the German vessel. The Intermarium Commonwealth's Varninchek class offers a comparable mix of stealth, electronic warfare, and long-range munitions, but is smaller and limited to regional power projection rather than interstellar deployments. Though technically superior in many aspects, the Königsberg's role is still likely to remain limited rather than central in the near term, constrained by its small numbers. In contrast, its rivals, particularly the Bay Ridge and Sakurajima classes, are being produced at scale and are already integral to their respective naval strategies. Independent freelancers are most likely to encounter a Königsberg-class heavy cruiser in regions of the Orion Arm bordering the German Reich, particularly in disputed trade corridors, border systems, and other high-risk areas where the Reich directly enforces its security policies. These vessels serve as both deterrence and border enforcement assets. They are extremely unlikely to use lethal force unless fired upon. If encountered, comply with all issued commands, ensure documentation is in order, and remain aware of local regulations, as legal interpretations may vary depending on local authorities. Since the darkest hours of the First Sinfaxi War, the fortress of Königsberg has been revered as a symbol of sacrifice and defiance across the greater German Reich. The warship that now bears its name carries this legacy forward, not merely some ghostly monument, but the harbinger of a new age. There is every indication that the Reich's leadership considers the final climactic moment of the Cold War to be imminent. Plan 89Z has not been developed for use in peacetime. The most important concern is where and how it will begin. Thank you for listening. I'm Major General Lois Sandborn, retired, and for 31 years, I had the distinct privilege of serving my country in the United States Army. I was proud to lead an armored brigade in combat, and honored to be called to serve under the Lassiter administration in the National Defense Authority. As an advisor to the President, I brought my first-hand experience in strategy, leadership, and decision-making to the table. Now you can access that same level of expertise through my partners in the Champlain Group, the most comprehensive repository of open-source defense and security intelligence in the Orion Arm. Presentations like this one don't just replicate my voice likeness. They've been assembled in real time by clusters of proprietary AI models that seamlessly incorporate my insights, experience, and personality. It's just one way in which, through the Champlain Group, you're not just getting data, you're gaining an edge.